And consumers are entering uncharted waters in the fuel price outlook, with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine set to see local fuel prices soar, not only in South Africa, but in countries around the world. They are seeing a gradual yet steep increase since the conflict began, with the petrol prices having risen by R1.46 a litre, while diesel prices increased by between R1.44 and R1.48 a litre, respectively, and the price of illuminating paraffin increasing by R1.21 per litre last week. The big question is whether South Africa can do anything to make the fuel prices more affordable. Joining me right now is Peter Morgan, CEO of Liquid Fuel Wholesalers Association, to talk more about this crisis. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. Let's start here, Peter. Where do your members sit in the value chain when it comes to fuel for the end user, such as motorists and those who use fuel such as paraffin to cook?
The independent wholesalers actually sit between the refiners and the customers, mainly in the non-urban areas.
When you say the liquid fuel retailers, you're meaning that they are getting it straight from refineries in South Africa and selling to the end user, who are the motorists?
Yeah, if you're only talking about retailers and not the commercial market, then you have two types of retailers. You have those who buy directly from the oil refiners, and then you have those, and they are all in the urban areas, or you have those who buy from an independent wholesaler who purchases from the oil company or has some sort of arrangement with the oil company and then delivers that fuel to the retailers in the non-urban areas.
Peter, let's talk about something that every person in South Africa is actually wondering right now, and make us understand perhaps why South African fuel prices are soaring the way they are, taking, of course, the geopolitical tensions in Russia and Ukraine. What's driving this particular increase? Is it a lack of supply, lack of demand? Because as far as we have been told, it is the supply constraints that we are going to see as Russia faces those sanctions.
Well, yes. If you look at it, principally it's an issue of nobody's buying from Russia, which makes it a shortage in the global markets. OPEC is, if you remember that OPEC was set up in the 60s to actually to manage the price of crude oil upwards. Okay, OPEC is a cartel. So if there was a lack of supply from Russia because people refused to buy from them, and the OPEC countries stepped in and made up that supply, then we wouldn't have this huge price spike because of the spike in demand. So it's really about a change in demand away from Russia, and there isn't somebody in the wings who's prepared to make that adjustment now. So it's a short-term glitch in a rather longer-term problem.
We are talking now about crude oil prices nearly reaching their historical $148 a barrel that we last saw in the 2008 financial crisis. Where you sit right now, do you think there's a huge possibility that we might actually, before the end of this month, reach that particular price and actually break those records?
If I look at the BFP price, which we look at every day, and we must remember that our price is made up of three elements. There's an element of the wholesale margin and secondary transport and secondary distribution, around R3. There's the taxes and levies at about R6.10. The balance of our price is what's called BFP, basic fuel price. And that's really what price we would pay if we didn't have refineries in South Africa and we had to import finished product. And that's where all the pressure is at the moment. It's not in the first two elements of our price. It's in the third element. So if there's no change in global markets until the end of the month, then we can actually look at a graph and extrapolate it and say that's possible. But as soon as there's any change in OPEC's behavior or other oil producers' behavior that says, guys, unfortunately we're dealing with traders when we talk about crude oil. So when something like this happens, they have a short-term opportunity to make a lot of money. So they will take that opportunity. It's when the first one blinks and starts to increase their capacity to make up that demand. The others should follow suit, and then the prices should start softening again.
Peter, one thing that South Africa can't do is put a cap on the petrol price, because that would lead to job losses and slash the bottom line for wholesalers and retailers alike. What do you make of those who are talking about now that the first two instances that you talked about, including levies, something must be done when it comes to the levies? Do you think that would actually put a dent on the high prices that we are paying in South Africa?
You see, the issue of taxes and levies is one that we should be having with Treasury, not with us. That issue around taxes and levies is not a discussion that we have. It's just not in our realm. But when you say you can't put a cap on the price, if only there was panic buying in 2005 in South Africa. The rumor was started that we have shortages and we're going like Zimbabwe, and there was actually massive panic buying that created shortages, because service stations can't handle a massive change in buying behavior. A report came out of that 2005 situation called the Marani Report of 2006. And in that Marani Report of 2006, there's elements in there that is relevant today as they were then. And one of those big elements is around the issue of strategic stocks. If we had strategic stocks in South Africa, and in the Marani report they talk about 90 days. If we had 90 days strategic stocks in South Africa, we could use that as a buffer. If we had 90 days of finished products stocked in South Africa, we could use that as a buffer. At the moment we have no buffers. So every day when the price changes, if there's massive increases like we're looking at now, there's money that's going on to slate levies that has to be paid back somewhere. Because we don't have strategic stocks, because we don't have our own crude oil inside of it, there's no way we can ride this wave. We have to take the bumps as they come, day by day.
And I'm sure, Peter, the fact that South Africa has a few refineries, and even those are actually shutting their doors, particularly if you look at Sapref in Durban, how will that hurt South Africa's fuel industry and ultimately the consumer in the end, as we have fewer and fewer refineries, which are small in size anyway?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the situation we had refineries that imported crude oil. They also import components that allows them to blend. They import finished products, so if it comes into one of the harbors and it's off-spec, they can put it through a refinery very quickly and clean it up. If you understand that refining process is disappearing fast, that really means, and because we've got no strategic stock, that really means that a situation where bad weather on the coast keeps vessels that are outside of the harbor for a couple of days. We can see situations there where we start having rationing inside because of weather. But we have a massive disadvantage in South Africa, and it's a locational disadvantage. If you're importing finished product, the ships, the vessels run around the equator east to west. We're about 3 weeks on the water from our major suppliers in South Africa. And a lot can happen to product if it's on the water. Not only the price changes and those risks, but product can actually go off spec. So the fact that we don't have the refineries we used to have is actually making this situation worse. So we're saying, we're way past the time, but it's never too late to start having discussions between the industry and government to say, what do we do about it? How can we handle the situation of strategic stocks? What can we do about that? What can we do as a South Africa incorporated solution about making sure that we don't get caught like this next time, that we've got some buffers that will allow us to manage in different ways the situation that we have and not have ourselves really on a balancing on a surfboard in a tidal wave.
Peter Morgan, the CEO of the Liquid Fuel Wholesalers Association, thank you very much for your time, saying that South African motorists will still need to, and consumers in general, will still need to stomach these increases which are coming because we don't have those strategic fuel reserves that we so dearly need.